You guys, it's actually really simple, okay? Just skip the latte. If you stop buying $7 coffees, you invest the difference, according to half the internet, you'll be a millionaire. Yeah, that's awesome, except the average car payment in America is $700. Groceries have gone up 25% in less than 5 years, and childcare costs more than college tuition. But yes, please tell me more about my latte. So the latte effect is actually a real term. It was coined by personal finance author David Bach, and he used it to talk about how little tiny purchases, like a to-go coffee, can actually add up over time. And to be fair, that's true. Most of us lose hundreds of dollars every month on little tiny purchases. I remember like a decade ago when they all came after our avocado toasts. The problem isn't that the advice about skipping your latte is false. The problem is it assumes your financial problem is a latte. Simply giving up to-go coffee doesn't make you question why your expenses keep growing or reconsider some of your assumed conveniences. It doesn't force you to ask whether the things you've normalized are actually making your life better. It's just another item on a checklist of financial advice. For years, we have been told to spend less, invest the difference, max out your 401k, open a Roth IRA, buy index funds, diversify, rebalance, and use dollar cost average. I barely know what half of those words I just said mean, and I'm not embarrassed to admit it, okay? I am a mom. I need to know 4 different shoe sizes. I need to remember which classroom has the nut allergy and which one has the teacher that just got married and now she has a different last name. I need to keep track of multiple schedules and somehow get 3 meals on the table every day. Optimize my portfolio? I don't have time. I'm tired. And it turns out I'm not alone. This is Anna Marie Lusardia. She is one of the world's leading researchers on financial literacy, and she has spent decades studying this. She summarizes one of her most well-known papers by saying that a large majority of Americans fail to understand basic financial concepts like compound interest, inflation, and risk diversification. Another national study found that only about 30% of Americans demonstrate strong financial knowledge. So when financial experts say, don't save your money, invest it, to the average person, it's like telling somebody who's never cooked to just make a souffle.
Nobody's a born cake maker. It's a matter of practice and determination.
This is why figuring out how to save money, or how to not save money, or I don't know, how to invest, how to spend less, or whatever it is that we're supposed to be doing, it's all so confusing. But I also think there is a change happening. If you look at what is trending when it comes to financial advice, there are actually more often than not, you don't usually see the advice of decades past. 20 years ago, it might have been about building wealth and money management, but today a lot of it is about changing our behavior with our money. The big things we see today are like no buy challenges, cash stuffing, under consumption core, and loud budgeting. I think it's a really interesting shift, and it's not that the older financial advice doesn't work. I mean, it does, but we're living in a different world. That advice is living in a different world. A generation a year ago, there simply weren't all of the opportunities we now have to spend. And let's combine that with the cost of living that just keeps going up. The question for most of us becomes less about what should I do with my savings and becomes a little bit more about how do I stop my money from disappearing? So last year, my husband and I started making a lot of changes to our finances, not because we suddenly became investing experts or mastered the stock market, but simply because we felt like too much money was going out. It made us really look at our actual lifestyle, question normalized spending and assumed conveniences, and work on fighting back against the economy that has been designed to make buying as effortless as possible. And I think the biggest financial challenge today isn't learning how to invest, it's learning how not to buy. Going back to the latte, my problem with it is that, again, it's just a checklist item. It's not a long-term solution. You can give up your daily lattes and never become a millionaire, because this is just a very small piece to the puzzle. It doesn't make us actually question or think about anything. It doesn't force us to consider the expenses that have become normalized. In Juliet Schor's book, The Overspent American, she talks about what she calls downshifters. These are people who get tired of working jobs they don't enjoy just to afford things they eventually realize they didn't actually need. Instead of chasing bigger lifestyles, they choose to live with less. Schor estimates that on average, these households reduced their spending by about about 20%. Over the last year, I think my husband and I have become what Shore would call downshifters. We've cut our monthly expenses by probably about 20% and our discretionary spending by probably even a little more. We still have plenty of room to improve. Downshifting isn't something you accomplish once and then you're done with it, is what I'm trying to say. Lifestyle inflation is always waiting to creep back in, so you have to keep questioning what you've started accepting as normal. This was the shift for us that finally made it sustainable after so many years of trying and failing to save money. So today I want to share some of the ideas, mindset shifts, and practical tricks that have helped us get there. But before we jump into them, a quick break to hear from the sponsor. A big thank you to Ultima Replenisher for sponsoring today's video. One thing that I've realized in trying to sort of spend less and just be smarter about my money is that being intentional with my money doesn't mean I never buy anything. It just means I think a little bit harder about the things that I use every day, whether they actually add value to my life, they actually make my life easier or not. And we're going to talk about that a little bit more in this video, but one of the things for me that I still buy is electrolytes. I'm horrible at remembering to drink water, but these just make water, drinking it, a lot more enjoyable throughout the day. They help me remember whether I'm editing all day or I'm working around the house or I'm running around with the kids. It's just a really easy habit that helps me stay on top of my hydration. Ultima has all 6 key electrolytes that your body uses every day, but without sugar, calories, carbs, or artificial sweeteners. It is low in sodium, made with plant-based flavors and colors, and it actually tastes good. My favorite flavor is raspberry. So if you're looking for a simple way to make drinking a little more enjoyable, a little bit easier in your life, you can definitely check them out. There will be a link in my description below to stay hydrated with Ultima Replenisher. All right, now let's get on to those ideas. One of the easiest ways to save money is to start questioning social expectations. These are things that so many of us are just blindly following, but we don't really stop to think, wait, do I want to do this? Do you want to do this? Why are we doing this? Let's take gift giving as an example. So my husband, his sister, and her husband recently made a no gift agreement for birthdays. I came to the realization that we had basically been sending the same money back and forth. They would send me a $100 gift card and then I would send them a $100 gift card, and then at the next birthday, they would send us $100 back. It was kind of silly, right? We all have small kids and huge to-do lists, and we work full time, and so I think it was kind of a relief for us to have one less thing to do. And the interesting thing about many gift-giving norms is they tend to ratchet upward over time. As someone around us spends more money on gifts, now we feel like we need to spend more. What was once considered a generous gift is now considered just adequate. And so the giver often has to spend more than they usually would just so they don't feel inadequate. So consistently, we have been spending more as Americans on Christmas gifts year over year. We're always spending a little bit more. NerdWallet recently reported that we spent something over $1,000 per household on Christmas gifts. But an interesting stat that I saw was that last year was one of the first years that we actually said that we were going to spend less. An interesting facet to that is that didn't end up happening. We actually still continued to spend more, but I do think it's an interesting turning point that we want to spend less, right? If anything, it is validating in the sense that you probably could find friends and family members that do want to spend less. And so throwing out the idea of, having a max budget or doing something a little bit different instead of just buying gifts. Now we can take the social expectation of spending to all sorts of other places too, particularly events. There's a lot of social expectations around events nowadays. Everything kind of has to be special, but you can peel some of that back. You could just have a potluck instead of going out to a restaurant for girls' night, or have just a low-key hangout instead of making something a themed event or a special dinner party. And what I like to think about when I think about doing this on my own life is to set the precedence. So I've started taking a lot of care and not making any event that I do feel over the top special. So for example, we invited some families over to our house for the last day of school. And in the past, I probably would have tried to do something a little more special, right? Maybe something really cool for the food, or I would have had a fun craft. Either way, there would have been more money involved. But I've been very conscious in the last year not to do these things because I find it sets a precedence. If I do something special, then people feel like when they have an event, they then need to do something special, and it kind of strips away the ability for us to just have these like casual hangouts. Okay, as I'm editing this section of the video, I feel like I need to clarify. I'm not trying to like poo-poo on cute parties. It's just more, I think, because of our access to social media and Pinterest and all of that, it has sort of become the norm to the point where now we feel like we can't just do a regular party. I recently was invited to a party and her house was beautiful and she had the thing catered and they had women going around and like handing out wine, and it was amazing. And as I left, I was with a couple other moms, and one of the moms was talking about a birthday party that she was planning for her husband, and she was sort of like, you know, now I feel like I have to do this sort of extra stuff. And my point to her was like, this party that we just went to was great. Like, I love what she did. It was beautiful. We can enjoy that, but that doesn't mean that every party needs to live up to that standard. And so that's why for me personally, I have been trying to do it less just to set the precedent. So people can go to these awesome themed parties, but then they can also see what just like a normal casual hangout is. And I feel like it sort of just levels the playing field. I'm not trying to say like, don't have a themed party. If that's your thing, do it and like invite me because I love it. But I also would love to just come over if you give me a frozen pizza from the grocery store.
Frozen pizza party.
We've taken expectations for events and made them bigger. A birthday party used to just be a cake with some friends, and now you need decorations, party favors, themed plates, custom cookies, a backdrop for photos. If you went to the beach, you used to be able to just like throw some towels in a bag with like sunscreen and maybe a bag of chips. Now you need special towels, new toys, some sort of fancy cooler that's basically like a Swiss Army knife. And don't even get me started on how this has affected holidays. We've started buying things for moments, things that we could easily do or source from what we already own because of the social expectation of it. And a lot of this comes from how we are advertised things. So the next way to curb spending is to work on deconstructing advertising. Part of the reason that advertisers have become really good at convincing us that every experience requires its own set of products is they attach these products to emotions and aspirations. Many times they're not selling us the product, but they're telling us that the product is required for an experience that could totally happen without them. So one habit I am doing is looking at reasons not to buy something, sort of deconstructing the way that things are sold to me. Okay, so I actually want to read a short section to you from The Overspent American where I think she says this really well. This is in a chapter where she's sharing some of her principles that she thinks will help individuals get off the consumer elevator, and she talks about deconstructing the commercial system. She says, the next time you watch TV, try an experiment. Instead of zapping the commercials or watching them mindlessly, try to deconstruct them. Watch a Jeep drive out to the edge of the Grand Canyon. What do you see? A chance to get closer to nature, freedom and individuality? Or a gas-guzzling commodity that fills the air with smog, helps turn wilderness into cement, and is a leading cause of accidental death? As the swoosh swishes by, consider whether Nike really stands for women's power, independence, and hipness as it wants us to believe. Or is the $2 million a day it spends promoting women in sports a sham in the light of the $1.60 a day it gives to its female Vietnamese workers? I love the way that she sort of asks you to look at commercials and marketing differently. Mind you, this book was written decades ago, but it still is very relevant to the marketing we see today. Next up, I want to talk about lifestyle inflation. This is getting into some of the good stuff. If I had to pick, I feel like one section on this list that probably would make the biggest impact to your finances would be lifestyle inflation. So if you don't know, lifestyle inflation is what happens when our spending rises every time our income rises. So we get a raise and then move into a nicer place. You get promoted, you upgrade your car, your income goes up, so you go on nicer vacations, you buy nicer things, you sign your kids up for more activities. But the kind of like evil underbelly of lifestyle inflation is how things that used to feel special or feel like a luxury now just become expected. They become normal. In the book Goodbye Things, he does a really good job explaining this sort of like want to continue to move our lifestyle up. Variances or changes are necessary for people to recognize stimuli. This is why we often find ourselves unhappy after we've owned something for a while. Although we initially had desired for it, our brain recognizes a lack of this variance once we get used to having it. That's basically basically how lifestyle inflation works. Once we have gotten used to a certain luxury, it just becomes normal. A few pages later, he goes on to say, everything around us is an item we had genuinely desired for at one point or another. But regardless of that level of our desire at the time, we get used to these items and eventually lose interest. And then we develop a desire to have something else. We want more stimuli and continue to acquire more and more. So in order to get that feeling of luxury again, you need to inflate your lifestyle again. And I've seen this myself in myself. The time in my life when I was chasing money the most was after years that I had made more money than I ever had before. The more money I had, the more money I wanted. And that's the thing about money. It's never enough. It doesn't matter how much you make, you'll always want more of it because we find ways for what we have now to not be good enough. As soon as you hit some annual income you think will make you happy, or you'll finally be able to buy the car or do the house project you wanted, once you hit that, you're just gonna pick some other new thing that you want. Basically, it will always let us down. In the 1996 book, The Millionaire Next Door, when that book was published, it revealed a sort of surprising habits of America's wealthy, showing that most millionaires lived frugally below their means. By avoiding lifestyle inflation, they were able to actually accumulate wealth rather than simply display the wealth. Obviously, this book is old and a millionaire is not really the same as a millionaire today, but I think the idea is still there. The idea is that if you can avoid lifestyle inflation, you can actually have the wealth instead of just display the wealth. Something I think about a lot is the idea of buy what you need, not what you can afford. Just because you have the income to buy something doesn't always mean that you should. And there's another saying I think about a lot when it comes to lifestyle inflation, and it is, do you want to be rich or do you want to feel rich? Lots of times we will inflate our lifestyle because we want to feel a certain level of, income bracket or whatever it is, but then we're sort of spending our money that actually is allowing us to be in that income bracket. A very surprising amount of modern spending is actually the cost of managing our conveniences. Once I started noticing this, I cannot unsee it because it is everywhere. A lot of the spending we do these days is just the cost of maintaining a life where we've put too much into it. We have created lives that require constant purchased support in order to sustain it. Think about that again. We have created a life where we need constant purchased support just to sustain it. We get our groceries delivered because we're too busy to go to the store. We have cleaners come because we've taken on a heavier workload at work. We have people to do our lawn services because on the weekends we're too busy to mow. I think there's a lot of things we pay for because we believe they are making our lives easier, but they really aren't. This is convenience illusion. I've talked about this a lot. It could be something like a smart device with monthly costs or online subscription. I've talked about so many of these in past videos. I actually have a few videos just about the topic of convenience illusion, and I'll link them down below. And on the topic of convenience, we can often avoid many convenience purchases just by freeing up our space and time, but we can also do it with a little bit of homework too. So I find a little bit of homework for my daily life actually saves me a lot of money. So one example is menus. So these are the meal planners I use. Sometimes I just write it down on a piece of paper, but I usually will print out these. I just made them in Canva and then I can just fill them out. Obviously when I go grocery shopping, I already have a meal plan for like dinner. And then I usually will buy snacks and produce and fruit depending on what's in season and what's on sale. So then when I get home, I've put my groceries away. I will finish filling in the rest of this. So I usually have dinner filled in already, but then I know like what snacks I bought. It is easy to forget things that you had bought, and then you end up buying extra stuff you don't need, or food gets wasted. And so this is such a time saver for me. And it honestly saves me so much money because I am planned and I am organized. So much less money spent at the grocery store because I know I'm just like filling in these blocks. And I actually do one for breakfast now too. So it's basically just like the same thing for each like day of the week. And this has worked really great because my kids know exactly what to expect. They know like on Tuesday we have eggs and toast. They always get to choose a fruit to have with it. That little bit of homework helps save so much money. So this is just one example, but I think there's a lot of places where we can do a little homework in our daily lives that will sort of save us overwhelmed that typically will lead to spending down the road. All right, I want to finish with a few sort of quick and practical ways to curb impulse spending. None of these are really revolutionary. Maybe you've heard a lot of them before, but they work because they create just a little bit of friction between wanting something and buying something. First up is the 48-hour rule. A lot of people call this the 24-hour rule. It is the idea that if you want to buy something, you have to wait 1 day before you buy it. I usually like to say a week. Wait a week if you can before buying something. Just giving yourself a little pause will help sort of prevent a lot of impulse purchases. And if you still wanted it in a week or 2 weeks or whatever, then maybe it's something you actually wanted, but it helps sort of prevent that. And I also think that it helps sort of just stop the habit of impulse purchasing, because I think that the more we impulse purchase, the more we do it. So if you sort of catch yourself in that and you don't allow yourself to constantly buy the minute you think of something, it will just diminish how much you do it overall. I love doing no spend challenges. I've done an entire no spend month. I will link a video about that down below, but you can do no spend days. Maybe like every Thursday is a no spend day. You can't buy anything, or do one no spend weekend a month. The reason I find them really effective is when you are allowed to buy nothing. Typically the way a no spend works is like you're buying nothing except absolute necessities. It just allows you to think about your purchases different. How many things you considered buying that weren't actually necessities. And it allows you to sort of look back on it and be like, oh my God, I almost bought that thing. And you know what? I didn't really need it. Remove the triggers, right? So you're going to unsubscribe from the emails from companies that you love that keep emailing you that your favorite jeans are on sale. Like, you already have the jeans. You don't need more jeans. It's fine. There's other triggers in our life, right? They could be social media accounts we follow. Maybe we follow a certain account because it tells us about great sales and it's always sharing the best discounts and blah, blah, blah. Those are just triggers to buy. Those are things you would not have bought had you not seen that post. Remove those from your life. Another one I like to think about is trigger stores. Certain stores are going to trigger us to buy a lot more impulsively. So I like to think about things like Home Goods or Marshalls, right? You go into the store, you see something really great. The way that these stores work is it might not be there when you go back, right? It's not a grocery store where they're always going to have ketchup, and that scarcity is going to make you more likely to impulse buy it. So avoid those impulse stores if you can. Are you going into that store to buy something that you could buy somewhere else where you'd be less likely to impulse purchase? Or like, do you maybe just don't even need to go into that store? Do you even need the thing you were going into that store for? Write purchases down. This is a really good one. It's sort of like when people keep food logs. It just helps you be aware of your spending. Write down everything that you've bought, but also keep like a column and write down all the things you almost bought but you didn't buy. So you can sort of see how much all these would have been impulse purchases would have added up and how much you ended up saving. I've even seen people share, like in Reddit forums, that every time they're about to make an impulse purchase, instead they take that amount and they transfer it to a savings account, and then they can see how much that account grows. Reducing your subscriptions is a huge one. This is something that my husband and I have done over the last 6 months. We have drastically removed how many monthly subscriptions we have. I think we have very few, less than 5 probably between both of us. So I'm talking about things, all of your streaming services, all of your subscribe and saves, just all of the apps that you might have on your phone, or random things that you have that you pay. You have to pay for everything now. When you want to read something, you want to read an article, you got to pay for those. And by removing that, it just streamlines your budgeting so much. So really consider these subscriptions. Like, do you really need them? Are you really using them? Yes, I get it. It's like $5 a month, and you're like, whatever, it's $5. But it's not so much the $5 that it is the clutter that it is adding to your bank account, that it is to your monthly budgeting. It just makes it harder to see a really good picture. When most people think about saving money, they think about sacrifice, and sometimes that is part of it. But the more I've thought about money over the last few years, the more I've come to believe that the biggest savings don't really come from deprivation, right? They don't come from getting rid of the latte. They come from questioning and reframing how we look at our money, thinking about things we do just because we've always done it, or questioning some of the complexity that we've added to our lives and if that is necessary, debating the lifestyle upgrades and assumed conveniences that we have. When you do this, saving money feels less like deprivation and a little more like control, or even honestly freedom. It's really empowering, and it allows you to spend more intentionally on the life that you actually want. All right, my friends, that does it for today's video. As always, thank you so much for stopping by and watching. I hope you're having a fantastic day. Remember to be kind to yourself and to others, and I will see you all in my next video.